Welcome to VMJPod's Employee Brand series with me, David Macciocca, and co-host Grant O'Donnell. Each episode uncovers bold ideas, real stories, and practical tips from experts reshaping how organizations attract and retain top talent.
Well, welcome to the VMJPod series where we're unpacking employer brand. I'm David Macciocca.
I'm Grant O'Donnell, and this is Margot Moore.
Hello.
Welcome, Margot.
Thank you.
Very exciting to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into it?
Yeah, sure. So I have about 14 plus years experience working with employer branding and large recruitment teams. So it's sort of all I know. And currently I am the Global Employer Brand Manager at Worley, which is an ASX listed company, but we are certainly global. We've got over 45,000 employees. So it's a really global business and lots of different things that we need to solve when it comes to employer brand.
Can't wait to unpack this episode because we're going to be talking about something that's really meaningful. And you've done some really awesome initiatives, not just yourself, but the team in collaboration. Something that's really unique is that you're reporting into marketing.
Yes.
And I think it would be a really good place to start because
It's not the commonplace, right? Often it's a TA situation. Crossing over to marketing, telling marketing, hey, have you heard of employer brand? They're like, and then they hear brand, they're like, but we're brand. What do you mean? So I guess you're sitting in the heart of it.
Yeah, I think it's unique because I haven't sat in a marketing function before. So it's unique in that sense. But I think it works really well because I think it shows the alignment with the broader marketing picture, the brand story, which it is so important that employer brand aligns directly to brand. And it just shows that the business kind of see the value in employer brand. And I think that's really excellent. And it just gives you, I'm sure people who don't sit in marketing still have access to, creative teams and, comms and all these other functions. But being in the team, sitting with the team, I think it's really great because it just means we can execute things to that same standard as the rest of the marketing function. So I think it works really well and I'm really enjoying my time sitting in the marketing team.
So having sat in both, are there any disadvantages to sitting in marketing?
I would say that because you're a little bit removed from the talent acquisition function, you have to work a little bit harder to really understand their difficulties. You have to make a little bit more effort in building relationships in the talent acquisition function, especially a business of the size of Worley, to really understand the nuances across the different regions and what their talent challenges are. Where are we growing? Where are we not growing? What are the difficulties across the different regions? And they're so different, recruiting in the Middle East versus recruiting in, the US versus Latin America. It's just so diverse. So I think that's probably a disadvantage is just you need to make a little bit more effort in understanding what's going on over the other side of the bridge. But I think it's a very collaborative team, so it's working really well for now. And I think having a background in talent and having exposure to such big global teams in the past obviously helps. I understand recruitment, so it's been okay for me.
And in this episode, we're going to be unpacking how to communicate more effectively to talent teams and internal comms, which is fascinating sitting from the marketing perspective. Like, what's your relationship and how do you communicate with the talent team? Is there a rhythm or routine that you're in?
Well, look, I'm only 10 months into the role, and there's been a lot of big projects that we've been working on. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of establishing a rhythm. I have a close working relationship with the global director of talent. So we catch up regularly and that's really important, obviously. So I'm having conversations with, the top of the food chain, if you want to call it that, so I know what they need and what's going on, and we're in constant contact. So that works really well. Another thing in our situation is that we have a recruitment marketing team that does sit within talent acquisition. So I work with them very, very closely and we're in constant contact too. So I will talk to the recruitment marketers on a daily basis. So I'm across sort of what they're working on. We work very collaboratively. If they want to soundboard something, they come to me and we sort of work it out together. And that I think works really nicely. And then when it's necessary, I guess I'll jump in a town hall and present, or, you know, if there's training that needs to be rolled out, we'll go down that route. It's a really big team, so I still have a lot of people to meet properly and get into the weeds of sort of the process itself. I think the focus areas for me since I joined the team have not been really looking at recruitment process so much. It's more been about EVP and a new careers website, new tech that we're implementing. So that's been a focus, but I think we've established a good foundation, and I think it's just about regular communication and having those, you know, frequent touch points, and that works for me. So yeah.
So it sounds like from the description there, and that was a new part for me to hear now, that obviously you've got recruitment marketing then sitting within TA, but you're also then sitting out in the marketing team. So yours is more the brand focus, and then they're sort of more the executional recruitment marketing delivery. Yeah,
I think that's a good way to summarize it. I think my role is very much strategic, and it's how do we link the employer brand narrative back to the brand story for Worley. And we do a lot of work at Worley to make sure our content is always aligned, our social media posts are always aligned. We're very process driven in terms of making sure we're really ticking all the boxes when it comes to our brand pillars and so on and so forth. So I forgot what the question was.
Oh, no, I think you covered it. Like, it was purely, I guess, for me, my curiosity around understanding, I guess, that delineation between where you're sitting in terms of like the brand aspects, and then it sounds like, and I guess that kind of that's also like, I guess, a really intelligent way to do it, having that sort of split, because then you've got more of the tactical elements that the TA team might need day to day, and they're sitting there quite close.
Yes. And I mean, exactly right. We have them scattered across the globe looking after particular portfolios of regions, and they have that day-to-day communication with their talent acquisition teams and their talent acquisition directors. So whilst I have a good idea about the different challenges and how those different diverse markets operate, they really understand what's going on. You know, with 45,000 employees, you can imagine how many roles we're recruiting at any one time. So they sort of are on the ground. They know that, hey, there's a big campaign happening in Saudi Arabia that we need to address in terms of getting talent in. So they are able to have, those more tactical conversations. And then we overlay that with the brand strategy and the employer brand strategy. And I guess coming from a more marketing focused background and team for me, we can explore new ways of doing things, and we can link in with social media or creative and work out the best way forward for, you know, addressing their challenge.
So one of the things that we spoke about previous to creating this episode is one of the key pillars that you've or initiatives that you've undertaken as Employ Brand in collaboration with others, obviously, but the human-centered design workshop that you did.
Yes.
And I'm really, I think anyone who's listening to this would love to hear your point of view on you know, how that was structured and what you got out of that.
Sure.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, stop me if I go on a tangent, if you've got any specific questions. But for the past, you know, probably 5 or 6, actually probably more, probably like 7 years or so, that's been a key focus for me implementing into employer brand. And I guess for people who are not familiar with human-centered design practices, I mean, it's in the name, but it's really about getting to the heart of your customer, or in recruitment purpose, it would be your candidates or your hiring managers, but really getting to the heart of their journey in a process, or, you know, often human-centered design is used to create, you know, minimal viable products or new products to the market, because it's really understanding, you know, the problems that someone's having and solving for that. And, you know, our candidates are our customers, and, you know, recruitment processes are usually not perfect. I think we can all admit that they're often really clunky, long, painful sometimes. So, you know, using human-centered design approach to optimize a process, in my head, if you've got candidates who are coming out having a fantastic experience, regardless of whether they are successful or not successful in a process, they walk away feeling like they like your brand. They've had a good experience. They've got a good perception.
They might apply again.
Absolutely. And I think that's the most important part, is that often you've got people who are silver medalists. They're great talent. They might not have been right for that role, but you want them to come back. You don't want them walking away saying, oh, well, I'm never applying to that company again. And I think that often as recruitment teams, we actually forget that, sure, we're recruiting, but if you're selling a product or you're a professional services company and you're annoying a lot of people and leaving a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth, they're probably never going to buy your product. They're probably never going to come and do business with you. And you could be dealing with, you don't know who you're dealing with. You could be dealing with super senior people who could potentially bring business to that company in the future. Or you could be dealing with a grad who's got a connection, whose uncle's a CEO somewhere, and, you just don't know. So
that's why you undertook the human-centered design approach. But do you mind if you tell us
a little bit about what that is? Sure.
What are the nuts and bolts, and I mean, how did you get buy-in?
I guess even what kind of triggered it? What made you sort of think, was there a problem that came up and you're like, all right, we need to look into this?
Well, I think that previously, I've worked for a lot of large companies. So as we said, they're complex businesses where you've got some parts of the business where things work really nicely and then other parts where they don't. And I think recurring themes in most recruitment teams is that a lot of candidates don't have a good experience, and we just know that. So we wanted to solve for that. We wanted candidates coming out having a great experience. So that's where we thought, well, what better way to truly understand someone's experience and take a human-centered design approach. So to answer the question about, well, what are some of those things you can do? So there's a lot of different design methodologies out there. For us, the ones that we focused on in relation to recruitment would be candidate journey mapping, persona mapping, and those deep dive one-to-one interviews where you really get to the crux of solving problems. So I think one that is probably most important or interesting in the terms of recruitment is the candidate journey mapping. And that would essentially be
from awareness through to offer and hire, or well beyond into
really literally mapping out your process from attraction, apply, phone screen. So really breaking it down into what somebody is experiencing in your process. So
I've got a diagram in my head.
Yeah. Well, what we would do is, and how you would go about this, and I was lucky enough to be able to go do upskilling in this area. So we didn't have to get, anyone externally in. We were able to do that in-house. But picture, a workshop day where you can have your whole team there if you like, and you literally print out each step of the process. You map it out. You get a room and you pop it all around the room, and you get Post-it notes and you got pens, and it's very interactive. I'm
assuming it's fun as well.
It's so fun, and I would recommend, especially larger teams where you've got so much nuance across different parts of the business and so on. I would recommend doing this process if you're serious about iterating and optimizing your recruitment process for the benefit of good candidate experience once a year at least, because that's how you're going to find pain points in your process, but also not just about solving the bad, but also where are the opportunities to delight your candidates, to leave them with a really memorable and positive experience so they walk out feeling like they're getting something, because most people don't get the job. So how are you giving back to these people who have likely spent a lot of time and effort going through your process? So, like I said, mapping it out, getting the butcher's paper and the Post-it notes, and going through the know, think, feel, or the think, feel, do, whichever way you want to approach it as a candidate. So you're going through that process and really thinking about, what do we want a candidate to know? What do we want them to think? And what do we want them to do at each step of the process? And where are the gaps now? Because there will be a lot that you uncover. And at the end of that process, what you're then left with is short, medium, and long-term, things that you can do to solve for some of those issues or opportunities. So there will always be, and I don't really love using this phrase, but low-hanging fruit. There will always be some quick wins there that you could go and implement the next day if you wanted to.
Well, that's good, because sometimes things just go into ether and they evaporate. At least you're capturing the actions, what the requirements are. Are you getting meta with the different job journeys, given the job families are different?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to break it down to that level, absolutely. I think generally the process itself in terms of like entering an ATS and then, you know, the applying from a job board, they won't change generally.
Yeah.
But that's probably where the next sort of phase of that, if you're going to measure NPS and CSAT, so candidate satisfaction, would come in with pulse surveys, because that's probably where you can drill down, if you've got a good tool that can drill down deeper into measuring where is the scores lower, which part of the business is has recurring themes in, you know, particular areas. And if I can give you some examples of that, if that would help.
What was the, I guess, to get to this sort of stage and through that human-centered design process, you brought the recruiters in into that conversation.
Absolutely.
Is there friction between what's the candidate journey and the best experience for the candidate?
Yep.
And I guess the recruiter, how much the recruiter takes on and the administration from that side, I guess being involved in that process?
From my experience, the recruiters really enjoy it because it gives them some time, some breathing space to actually sit back and reflect on the process. And look, there's going to be parts of the process that you cannot change, like the clunky background checks or the, you know, maybe perhaps your reference checking process isn't great, but they're all, I promise TA teams out there, you will find something that you can implement the next day or start tackling the next day to improve your process.
This episode is brought to you by Video My Job, introducing the fastest way to turn employee stories into multi-channel content. One video now instantly becomes branded blogs, quote cards, social posts, and more, all perfectly formatted for the channels you use to attract and engage talent. And the best part? Zero editing required. Record once, repurpose everywhere. Book your demo at videomyjob.com and experience the new era of employee content creation.
This is really measurable as well, because this is a play on conversion.
Yeah. Which plays back to the marketing side, right?
Yeah.
Do the recruiters, is that the conversation that you have with them as well? Obviously, you bring your marketing perspective and then they're looking at it as like their recruitment funnel. Do they refer to that sort of side? Or they're more thinking, I just need to get this many people through here, through to the hiring managers?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm sure they do look at it like that from a, you know, performance or KPI perspective. But I think that at the end of the day, most recruiters, in my experience, like they want candidates to walk away feeling great, even if they don't get the job. So I think that, again, going back to the human side of it, if we're able to, as a team through these workshops and this design approach, find ways to improve the process, I think that it's less about the numbers and whatnot. It's actually about, okay, we can actually lift the NPS score here for my part of the business, or I can lift the candidate satisfaction score here, and I can see those numbers and that stability of experience, rather this like roller coaster up and down turbulent sort of experience where some people are walking away happy and some people really, you know, disgruntled. So, that would be measured through, like I said, those pulse style surveys.
Yeah, so we're touching on surveys, and I'm curious to know, are we doing surveys before the workshop or are we doing it after the workshop?
Well, in terms of candidate surveys, measuring candidate satisfaction?
Yeah, like are you using that data to inform where the opportunities are?
Yeah.
So you're creating the right conversations internally, or are you doing both?
Yeah, well, you can. There's never too much data. What we've done in the past is implement the pulse style survey. So look, like it could be 2 questions. Like it's quick.
Something.
You don't want people having to, you know, sit there for 5 minutes doing a survey. But we would take those really key moments in the process and measure at that. So for example, we might do a pulse survey after you've had a first interaction with a recruiter, because you've had the human interaction, was it positive? Then you might have a pulse survey delivered after a hiring manager interview. And then again, at the end of the process, regardless of whether they're successful or not successful. So I've seen a lot of teams only want to survey the successful candidates. And to me, that data is pretty invalid because obviously the people that are more important are those that don't get the job actually to tell you about the process. So that data is really useful because even though you've gone through the human-centered design workshop journey mapping exercise and you've identified pain points, the pulse survey is just either confirm that what you've done to fix certain problems is working, or that there are still pain points. So I'll give you an example of what the Pulse surveys have shown in the past, was that recurringly people were having a negative experience at the interview stage. And then in certain parts of the business, that experience was even worse than others. So we were able to say, okay, something's going on here. At interview, people are often not having a good experience. And in these parts of the business, it's really, really bad. So what's going on? And what we were able to sort of get to is there was an issue there with hiring managers in delivering to the EVP or delivering a good experience to candidates. So many things you can do to address that. But one thing in particular that was addressed was lack of feedback. So people were having, spending all this time prepping for an interview, likely not successful because most people are not successful, and then they get nothing. Why didn't they get the job? How could they improve for next time? And very unhappy about getting really poor quality feedback or just no feedback at all. So what we were able to do using that Pulse survey data was, and look, this is so simple. It's not groundbreaking what I'm about to say. But we were able to say, all right, we need to solve this feedback thing, because the recruiters were begging often for weeks trying to get feedback from hiring managers so that they could go back to the candidates. So what we did was we just automated a really simple feedback template that would be sent within 1 hour of any interview, goes to the hiring manager. They fill it out so they're not going on that forgetting curve. They've got it fresh in their mind. They send it back, done. And all of a sudden you've got high quality, timely feedback that the recruiter can then deliver to the candidate.
That's cool. Workflow.
And great feedback, I think, probably for the recruiter as well, because obviously going through all these steps and you're like, they look good on paper. I've had the conversation. You get to them and it's like, maybe it wasn't so right. So it's also potentially, a clarification between the recruiter
for sure
and the hiring manager to make sure that the right people are coming through as well.
Well, that's it, because nothing...
And improve the candidate experience.
Absolutely. There's nothing more frustrating for recruiters who just keep giving candidates that they think are good and then they just keep getting told no. So,
Are the hiring managers receptive to receiving feedback? And how do you train them to be better?
I know, it can be tricky. Look, some parts of the business are always more engaged and more willing to go through change than others. That's so normal, I think. So what we would usually do is choose the least resistant path. So, rolling things out in stages, getting your most engaged group of hiring managers who are like going to be receptive, going to be open to change, tackling them, and then building a really nice case study to take to the rest of the business and rolling it out that way. I think that's my biggest tip there is go with the people will be on board, show how the success looks, and then everybody else gets jealous and they want the success too, and then they're more likely to go through the same process. So yes, I think there's always more difficult stakeholders than others, and I think recruiters know that. Like that, there'll be recruiters out there thinking, I know I've got the most difficult. Dilemma. Yeah, exactly. I've got the most difficult portfolio of stakeholders here. But you know what? Like, if you're measuring and you've got the data to back it up, I think that's really important, because you can say, hey, look at the satisfaction scores that we're getting in this part of the business where we've implemented this, and then look at your scores. And that's not great from a candidate experience, an employer brand, and a brand, point of view.
And are they held to any of these measures, or is it more of a cycle?
She's cracking the whip.
Or more of a cycle of feedback to go, okay, this is what it is. I mean, from a recruiter perspective, obviously there's a key part there, but it could be even a conversation that then leads to say, hey, look at all the time from a recruiter perspective, we're investing in this, because ultimately the hiring manager, particularly within tight circles, can make that quite difficult to then attract people back to the organisation, right? Be like, oh yeah, I can't, but I don't want to work for that person. Exactly. Or I don't want to work in that area. They can give a bad name through the recruitment experience, but also being the manager as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm not sure if many businesses would put hiring manager satisfaction scores into performance reviews, but again, if you've got the data, it's hard to ignore it when it's right in front of you. So I think in my experience in the past, when we've had these issues, it has gone back to HR. It has gone back to those HR business partners to give that feedback to people higher up and deliver that. And I think it has resulted in the past in extra training for hiring managers, putting some more rigor in terms of making sure if you haven't gone through hiring manager training within the last year, you go through a refresher. So things like that. I've seen that in the past, absolutely, as a result of these metrics.
So 45,000 people, I can't imagine how many hiring managers they have. And I think there's there's a statistic that there's roughly about 12% of employees within a business are involved in the interview process at some stage. So they're probably begging for a process as well. And they probably want to have some sort of approach that they can follow.
It just gives you confidence, right? Like if you don't do this sort of thing regularly, I mean, recruiters, obviously that's their bread and butter. They're doing all this at the time. But for a hiring manager, if you have a small team and you don't have a significant turnover, you're probably not actually recruiting a lot. So your familiarity might be 6 months, 12 months, the last time you did a whole bulk of interviews. So yeah, having that sort of process to fall back on, some ways to measure it, to deliver success for the business. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
And what's the role of, I'm assuming content plays a role in improving the candidate experience. You mentioned survey, it's a form of content as well, but and what's the interaction with being able to set up that process so you're sort of taking it out of the hands of the recruiter or the hiring manager for triggers in the applicant tracking system?
And when you say content, do you mean like delivering content to
Messages.
Candidates? And yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a really good point, because another example that we were in one of my roles that we were able to uncover was that particularly in volume hiring where you get a lot of drop-offs, there were things we could do, and this goes back to, it's not solving a pain point necessarily, it's actually just creating an opportunity in the process to make it better, was that we thought, well, let's hyper-personalize this journey for people through giving them content that you may not usually get until you're a successful candidate. So we wanted to make everyone in that process feel really important that they were in this process, and we didn't want them to drop off. We wanted them to stay till the end. So we were able to really personalize the recruitment process for a particular part of the business with content. And that was done through like a welcome pack once you enter the process. Like once you get to sort of that phone
screen. Did you know about this perk about the business?
Absolutely. So making them excited about the opportunity, humanizing the function by giving like little welcome messages by, key people in that part of the business, talking about, perks, benefits, and, people networking groups, things that you can get involved in. And we were able to sort of deliver these little content, specials throughout the process, as well as once you got through and you were successful, you got like this special welcome pack as well, which had video content and all that sort of thing. And it made the process really specific to the job that they would end up doing, not just your general, like, these are our values and, but really like, well, what does it mean to actually do this job in this part of the business? So that's a really good example, content. And back to my point, it's not necessarily about solving a negative, it's about an opportunity.
It's just so hard to attract top talent to your business. And the last thing you want them to do is, if you've got someone in the funnel, is not take the role and go somewhere else because they've communicated messages better.
And that you've made them feel like, you've warmed them up, they feel like they're already part of the team. Yeah. So, it makes it harder for them to walk away because they already feel like they work there in a way.
You've already stepped yourself into that organization,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
You can visualize yourself being there.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Yeah. Connecting all the way through. And I'm interested, I guess we've been focusing a lot more on the front end and the TA sort of, getting up to this almost sort of point of getting an offer, and we've talked about this sort of content here. How much further does this journey continue on that you've sort of used this human-centered design?
Well, that's a really great question. And often we think of employer brand sort of ending at that offer stage, but it absolutely doesn't. I think, employer brand for employees is just as important. And I've got to admit, it's definitely not as much the focus because it's always about the front end, as you said, but it's just as important. And I think that doing that same process for the employee journey, you can absolutely replicate that across the employee journey as well, and do the same pulse surveys, whether that's, maybe you do like 100-day survey for new starters. And we've definitely done that in the past, the new starter survey at that 100-day mark. But then it's also about measuring, are employees coming into this organization and are they actually living the EVP that we sold them at the start? Is that actually...
Or is the EVP being delivered that you sold at the start?
Do they know the EVP? Do people come in, do they actually know like the key elements of that EVP, and is it true? Because if it's not the experience of an employee, then it probably needs to be revisited.
We've been going for a little while and I feel like we could talk so much more. Do you have do you have a last question?
Any sort of final parts? Any exciting things coming up that you want to maybe just give us a little glimpse of that you're focusing on within this? I know you're only...
She doesn't have much longer. She's
First,
having a baby soon.
well,
a few weeks left.
Yeah, but that's also one of the things. And actually, that's a really...
What are you going to leave for the team to do whilst
I know,
you're
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what I was
sure.
going to be, because often is that situation. And look, I'm in a similar situation. You kind of you get that sort of environment where you kind of go, oh, okay, now I've started to build this traction.
Yeah.
I'm going off, doing a very important project of obviously going to now have a baby. But then you're thinking ahead, I've built this momentum, we've done this design.
Yeah.
Are there certain things that you want to continue on from there?
Yeah, so I think in my current role, as I mentioned, new careers website's coming up, and that's been a really key focus. We're getting some new AI tech in our recruitment team, so that's going to really revolutionize the process. Those two things are launching towards the end of the year, and then I'll be on leave, so I guess what I'm leaving for the team is to really make sure that that's all optimized from a employer brand perspective. Like, is the look and feel consistent? Is the messaging consistent across that entire sort of like visiting the website, applying for the role, job ads, the look and feel, everything, is it all consistent? But then I think moving forward into next year, I think the focus would be to really create an ecosystem where we have a bit of an always on approach to employer brands. So there'll be those overarching global messages, but then in our critical talent markets, so where we really have a unique focus because of demand and growth, we have that always on sort of targeted and tailored messaging so that we can be a bit more proactive around other initiatives. So not set and forget, but switching some particular tactics on so that our brand is front of mind, our EVP messages for different regions are front of mind and relevant to different markets, so that we can be a little bit more focused on creating video content or employee content, or doing some of those more human-centered design pieces where we're finding opportunities to really make the process stand out, or more training for hiring managers or whatever it is. So I think once we've optimized the new website and this new tool and everything's running smoothly, then it's about popping that layer over the top so that we can know that our brand is, always in market, always front of mind. Yeah, especially in the markets where we're not as well known. We're very well known in APAC, being an Australian-made business, but our brand is not as well recognised in other talent markets. So yeah, we want to really address those issues and focus our attention there, and we can achieve that by overlaying with that always-on sort of retargeting approach to some of our employer brand comms and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
It's been a fascinating episode, and I think people want to connect with you, Margot. And if they do, I'm assuming on LinkedIn,
Yes.
if they've got any questions around playbooks
Yep.
or opportunities for them to think about how they could take those steps on human-centered. They don't have much time, though. If they're going to reach out to
I'll still be
to
on
Margot.
LinkedIn, I'm sure.
No, you cannot be working. You really need to take your foot off the pedal.
Personal network.
Yeah, exactly.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No
Thank you.
worries. It was great to chat to you both.